The smell of the ocean air clashed fiercely with the putrid stench of blood and entrails. Waves crashed around him as he stared blankly at the horizon, while the Spanish galleon that had brought him there grew smaller and smaller. With disgust, he threw his speckled breastplate to the ground, and his once sun-tanned olive skin turned pale, like alabaster. He had never been the most popular officer, but the thought of abandoning a man in such a way was something he could not conjure in his wildest fantasies. He gradually shifted his attention to the stifling darkness of the jungle behind him, to the ground littered with limbs, guts, and other things he was unwilling to spend much time identifying. The stench became unbearable as he struggled unsuccessfully against the urge to empty the contents of his stomach. He grabbed his belly anxiously as he hobbled towards a shadier part of the beach. The heat was intense and all-encompassing, a tropical heat that was definitely ill-suited to him at that moment. The sun was setting slowly, which usually provided some relief in such circumstances, but the temperature remained unchanged as he tried to collect himself. For a brief moment, he fondly recalled the time he spent in his youth hunting and camping in the forests surrounding his family's hacienda in an Iberian village. This fleeting moment of nostalgia was abruptly cut short when he felt the air rip beside his head, caused by the whistle of a lightning-fast arrow. He did not wait to find out who or where the arrow had come from, but quickly collected himself and darted into a mad dash deeper into the jungle, gradually being consumed by the abyss and entering what seemed to be an entirely different planet. The dissonant cries and squeals that sounded like an orchestra played by many different birds greeted his ears in a dizzying cacophony. The combination of his anxiety and nausea, coupled with this symphony of noise, proved almost unbearable as he collapsed to the ground, gradually accepting the fate in which he now found himself. Although the setting sun provided a dissipating amount of light outside, deep within the jungle, the thickness of the lush green flora prevented most of the light from penetrating inside. He had led this expedition off the shores of New Spain a few weeks ago, intending it to be strictly exploratory in nature, but his men had other ideas. There had been long-standing rumors about this island, part of a chain of islands off the western coast of New Spain. The native population of the mainland spoke of these islands with deep reverence and respect, sharing fantastical tales of an advanced ancient civilization that predated their own and once inhabited much of the Pacific until several global cataclysms and rapidly rising sea levels rendered both the land they inhabited and the people themselves functionally extinct. The scattered remnants of this society spread eastward and settled in various regions along the coasts of South and North America, bringing with them advanced knowledge in architecture, agriculture, and astronomy. Some of the more fringe theories regarding these enigmatic people spoke of ritual sexual magic, as well as human and animal sacrifices in an attempt to reach a connection with various deities, but the extent of their success was undocumented. The men of this expedition caught wind of this island harboring many secrets, including stories of untold amounts of gold and jewels, which made them insatiable with lust. Unknown to their commander, a small party of men set out into the jungle one night to explore and search for clues regarding this vast wealth, and they never returned. The following morning, when the officer learned of what had happened, he sent 4 more men to look for their comrades, despite his indignation. When they too did not return, he made the decision to cut the expedition short, intending to prepare the ship and set sail in 2 days. That night, the universe seemed to have other plans. A few hours after sunset, when almost everyone was asleep except for a few sentries, an army made up of shadows attacked the camp and began wildly and indiscriminately gutting and tearing off the limbs of the previously sleeping men. The sentries were nowhere to be found, and the camp descended into pure chaos. Those who could run ran in all directions, including the officer. When he reached the outer perimeter of the jungle, someone or something quickly struck him in the back of the head, and he did not wake until the next day, just in time to see his beloved El Hermes sailing off without him. As he sat there recounting the events of the past days and weeks, he was suddenly overcome with an inexplicable creepy feeling as the hair on his arms and neck stood up in stark contrast to the tugging feeling he felt deep in his gut. He began to wonder if he was hallucinating, or if his hearing had somehow been impaired from the blow to the head he had endured the night before. He slowly rose to his feet, and, blinking his eyes periodically, gradually came to the understanding that all the animals that had previously overwhelmed his auditory system were now completely silent. The only thing he could hear was the sound of his rapidly increasing heartbeat, each thud of blood causing his head to throb. He picked up a stick and broke it in half, confirming that he still retained the ability to hear. The sounds of rustling leaves and someone or something approaching from behind quickly snapped him back into reality, and he ran forward, never looking back. Eventually, he stumbled upon a small waterfall, and as he approached, he could see a cave hidden behind the cascading flow of water. He was happy to have at least found a source of fresh water and potentially some shelter, but was greatly unnerved as he approached the cave, pondering what may lie in its depths. Despite this, he concluded that this would give him the best option for surviving the night as he trudged forward. As he entered the mouth of the cave and gathered his thoughts, he came to the realization that there was a glowing light emanating from a portion of the walls nearest to the ground. It appeared to be some kind of bioluminescent fungus or plant substance, and its soft green light was somewhat soothing. He collapsed in a heap, too tired to go deeper into the cave. As he struggled to resist the urge to fall asleep, he thought he saw the faint green light flicker and turn into a deep bright red. But he was snoring before he could ponder it further. It seemed like several hours had passed, and he woke with a start. He shook his head desperately left and right and realized that it was dark all around, and the waterfall could no longer be seen or heard. He screamed until he was hoarse, but could not make out which direction his voice was carrying, feeling as though he might be in a large cavern. He attempted to walk and feel his way around, but his efforts were futile, and as he began to slump to the ground, he slowly turned on his side in submission, curling into a fetal position. A single tear rolled out of the corner of his eye, and he felt it trickle across the bridge of his nose and drip, meeting the ground with a pitiful plopping sound. At that very moment, he slowly opened his eyes and could not believe his surroundings. He looked up and was almost blinded by the bright sun, and squinting his eyes, he looked around at the area he was in. He was lying on a patch of soft grass on a hill and could see his parents' hacienda down below. Not believing his eyes, he dashed down the hill and was at the front door in an instant. He opened the door and saw his mother cooking breakfast. She looked at him with a warm smile as she beckoned him to sit down. She poured him a bowl as she listened intently to his vivid recounting of the fantastic dream he had just experienced. She laughed with him, marveling at his intellect and active imagination as he relished the taste of the gazpacho he was slowly eating, savoring every bite. His father was picking something up in town but would be back later to take him hunting. All was well in his world. 2 weeks later, El Hermes arrived at the port city of Nueva Vizcaya in Mazatlan a few days ago. And to the absolute shock and horror of the first people on board, it was empty and completely devoid of life. Their best minds could not understand how this was possible or what could have happened to the officer and his men who occupied the ship. More men were gathered, and consultations were held with some of the top admirals in the area. Today, they finally arrived at the island that the officer was said to be exploring. The men decided to split up and go in several different directions to cover most of the territory. After several hours of searching, one party came upon a clearing with a small waterfall, and they made their way closer. As they focused, they could see a cave hidden behind the falling stream of water, and they carefully made their way inside. When they finally reached the entrance of the cave, they were surprised to see a glowing green mushroom-like substance along the bottom of the wall that was lighting the cave. They gradually made their way deeper when they came upon a large and strangely shaped mass of this substance. As they came close enough to make out what it was, they were horrified to realize that it was the officer they had come to find, lying lifeless and apparently being consumed by the strange fungus. At the very moment of this discovery, the green glow changed to a bright red, and in an instant, all the light disappeared. There was nothing left in this abyss of darkness, nothing but shadows.